Roland didn't ask to be reborn. One moment he was himself, and the next he was waking up in someone else's body. A prince, apparently, in some grim little border town that looked like it had never seen a good day in its life. He had no idea what had happened at first, but the overturned wine goblet on the floor filled in the blanks pretty fast. Someone had poisoned the original prince, and Roland had slipped into the vacant body. An old man had come to collect the prince for some official business, and a nervous maid had tried to turn him away at the door, claiming the prince was asleep. The way she said it was too suspicious. But the old man walked in anyway, and Roland was just barely pulling himself together by then. The business at hand, as it turned out, was an execution. Outside, a crowd had already gathered, screaming for blood, hurling rocks at a young woman they decided was a witch. The nobles watched from a balcony above with wine in their hands, completely unbothered. Roland stepped outside and took it all in. The crowd and their screams, the woman at the center of it all who didn't look like a witch. He called for the trial to be postponed, which landed about as well as you'd expect. The royal knight Carter told him that wasn't how it worked. Once a witch was identified, she had to die immediately or she'd draw more of her kind to the area. Roland said that sounded like a great opportunity to catch them all at once, and the knight had nothing to say to that, so the execution was put off, and Roland climbed into a carriage back to the mansion, not yet realizing the maid sitting next to him was the same person who had just tried to have him killed. Back at the mansion, alone with his thoughts for the first time, Roland sat with the full weight of his situation. He was a nobody prince in a nowhere town with no allies and no plan, running around in a body that someone else had discarded. He caught his reflection in a mirror and thought, well, at least the guy was good looking. Something to work with. That evening, the royal advisor came to dinner and wasn't interested in small talk. He wanted to know why Roland hadn't given the order, and he laid out exactly why it mattered. Witches had been spotted in the western forest nearby, and a symbol had been found. The mark of something called the Witches' Cooperative Association, a group that had formed to unite all witches toward a single purpose, reaching a place called the Sacred Mountain, the one location in the world where witches were said to find permanent peace. Because of that goal, the association was always recruiting. Roland kept his expression neutral and asked, almost offhandedly, whether the concern was that the association would find out she was still alive and come to break her out. The advisor said yes, exactly that, and then he described what had actually happened at the northern mine a few days earlier. The shaft had collapsed, workers were trapped, and in the middle of the chaos, the witch had revealed what she could do. Burned a man until there was nothing left of him but a stain on the floor. After hearing that, Roland decided he needed to see her for himself. The old man lost his composure entirely. Roland also noticed they weren't preparing a pyre and asked why, and the advisor said with complete seriousness that fire didn't work on her. Roland went down to the dungeon anyway. The knight with him begged him to turn back, warning that he couldn't promise Roland's safety. Roland told him that avoiding danger was no way to learn how to defeat it. The knight pushed back carefully, saying there was a real difference between bravery and just walking into something you couldn't survive. Roland pointed out that by that logic, they were only in the business of punishing the weak, and the knight didn't have a good answer for that, so they kept going. The woman in the cell wasn't what Roland expected. She was young and obviously exhausted, with very blue eyes that carried no menace in them whatsoever, just a kind of quiet certainty, like someone who had already made their peace with where things were headed. Even chained, the knight posted up defensively the second they stepped inside. Roland introduced himself and asked her name. She said it quietly, Anna. He asked her to tell him what happened. She was reluctant, clearly broken, but she did. Her father was a miner. When the shaft collapsed and he got trapped, Anna ran to help him. While he was pinned and unable to move, another man grabbed the chance to steal the savings her father had spent his whole life scraping together. Her father fought back from the ground, injured and barely able to move. When Anna got there, the thief already had a pickaxe raised over her father's head. She killed him to save his life. Roland asked how he ended up captured, and the advisor answered for her. Her father had turned her in. There was a reward of 25 gold coins for identifying a witch, and he took it. Roland let that sit for a moment and then asked her, directly, how she had managed to kill a full-grown man who was bigger and stronger than she was. Anna said quietly that it was what people called the devil's power. Roland asked her to show him. Everyone in the room immediately started panicking. Even Anna herself looked at him like he had a death wish and told him that curiosity like his tended to get people killed. Roland looked her in the eyes and said that if she were actually a demon, he wasn't the one she should be going after first. That would be her father. He watched something crack open in her expression, and the tears came. He stepped closer and asked her plainly, was she someone who deserved pity, or was she just very good at faking it? Then, while the knight was physically trying to drag him back, Roland reached forward and yanked off the collar that was suppressing her power. Everyone bolted. The cell exploded with fire, raw and overwhelming, and the knight was screaming at Roland to run. Roland stayed put and told him to hold on, because Anna was controlling it. The fire was massive, but it wasn't spreading. She was deliberately keeping it contained within the cell walls. Roland watched her walk through the flames toward him, her clothes burning completely away until she extinguished everything herself. And then she asked him in a calm voice that sent a chill straight down his spine whether his curiosity had been satisfied. She told him that now that he'd seen it for himself, he could go ahead and give the order to execute her. Roland took off his own cloak and draped it around her shoulders instead. The next day, Roland took Anna outside for a walk. The first time she had seen sunlight in what felt like forever. Roland used the moment to talk to her honestly. He picked a wildflower from the ground and asked Anna what she thought it was. She said it was just a common weed. He asked whether the flower itself had changed at all from one moment to the next. She said no. He told her that the exact same flower was considered beautiful by some people and worthless by others, and neither of them had actually changed the flower. What changed was their perception of it. Her power worked the same way. It wasn't inherently good or evil, it just was. The whole story about witches being servants of the devil, about their power being impure, that was just an opinion, and opinions could be changed. Anna fired back through tears, saying he was oversimplifying a situation that was genuinely dangerous. Her power terrified her. It had hurt people. It would hurt more people if she lost control of it, and there was nothing simple about that. Roland sat with it for a moment, then said with complete honesty that if she wanted to die, he wasn't going to stop her. But dying wouldn't fix anything. Her father would still hate witches. Everything she had lost wouldn't come back. Nothing would change at all. And then he said the thing that actually reached her. She could choose a different path. She could help him build a world where witches were free to live without being hunted. Anna went very still. In a quiet voice, she admitted that she had never wanted to hurt anyone. She just wanted to be free to study, to read, to sing out loud without fear. She just wanted to live like a normal person. She looked at him with wet eyes and asked whether that kind of world could actually come to be. Roland held out his hand and told her yes, but only if they worked together. Anna looked at his hand for a long moment, then made her choice. She took it. Roland told her to start training with her power immediately, to work with it until she had genuine control rather than just suppression. That was settled. That night, though, new trouble arrived. A mysterious female assassin had already sent word to other witches about what Roland was doing inside the border city, which meant things were already moving beyond his walls. The morning after a full all-nighter going through city documents, Roland had a clear picture of what he was dealing with. The border city was a mining town completely suffocated by noble corruption, and on top of that, it had zero agricultural production of its own. It couldn't feed itself under any circumstances. He sat down with his advisor Barov and asked how the city handled its food supply. Barov explained the whole arrangement. Every bit of ore the city produced was traded to Longong Fortress in exchange for food, but the deal was designed to keep workers barely functional rather than actually fed. The previous lord, Baron Boris, had accepted this without question and handed over every last piece of ore in exchange for scraps. Roland mentioned Boris and said he had never trusted the man, and Barov confirmed that Boris and the other nobles all had personal financial interests tied to the fortress. They had no reason to want the arrangement to change and every reason to maintain it exactly as it was. Roland said that was ending now. He told Barov to cut off all trade with the fortress immediately and replace it with a new deal. Sell the ore to Willow City and buy food directly from them. Barov got nervous and said Willow City had never dealt with that kind of volume before and might not be willing to take it on. Roland said that they would sell at half the market price, and with margins that favorable, no merchant anywhere was going to say no. Barov then worried about what happened when the stockpile ran out. Roland laid out the longer vision. Once they had built up enough resources, they would expand. The border city sat right at the source of a river that cut through the entire kingdom, and with enough ships, they could trade with everyone from one end to the other. That river would become the border city's Silk Road. Then Barov dropped the problem Roland hadn't accounted for yet. If they burned the relationship with the fortress would close its gates to the city's residents when winter came. Roland didn't understand why that mattered until Barov explained what winter actually meant in that region. When the cold settled in, the gates of Dragonspine Mountain cracked open and corrupted the local wildlife, transforming animals into bloodthirsty demonic beasts that attacked in massive coordinated hordes. Since the border city had no walls of its own, every year the entire population evacuated to Long Fortress and sheltered there for months until the weather broke and the beasts retreated. Without that option, winter became unsurvivable. Roland called in the 2 patrol captains and a man who had actually killed the creatures before, wanting to understand the problem from every angle. One of the captains froze up the moment he realized he was standing in front of a prince. Not a single word came out of him. The other stepped up and explained how the current system worked. Every autumn, the patrol kept a close watch on the misty forest for early signs of beast activity. When they spotted the warning signs, they lit the signal fires and got everyone to the river and down to the fortress by boat as fast as possible. Roland asked whether the beasts ever followed them onto the water, and the captain said no, the current ran too fast and too deep. And in the entire recorded history of the city, not one demonic beast had ever crossed the river. Roland asked how long the demonic period typically lasted. The captain said 2 to 3 months on average, ending when the sky cleared and the snow melted. But the previous year it had stretched to 4 months, and a lot of people died. Roland pressed on that point. If everyone was inside the fortress, how were people starving? The captain explained that the fortress handed out food based on how much ore each person had delivered before the evacuation, and with careful rationing that covered about 3 months. Once the ore ran out in the 4th month, there was no way to go back to the city and mine more, and people dropped dead of hunger right inside the shelter that was supposed to keep them safe. The full picture snapped into place for Roland completely. Long Fortress wasn't a solution. It was a trap designed to keep the city dependent. The hunter who had fought the beasts stepped forward and introduced himself. He had killed 2, a mutant boar and a mutant wolf. And he walked Roland through how the corruption worked. The beasts were just animals twisted by the mountain's dark energy, but the corruption amplified whatever made each animal dangerous to begin with. A wolf became drastically faster. A boar grew hide so thick that crossbow bolts simply bounced off. Roland noted that despite all of it, they were still animals at their core, still running on instinct, and the hunter agreed, but warned him that the hybrid beasts were a completely different category. Those ones could transform mid-fight, sprout wings, track prey by scent no matter where they hid, and they weren't just hunting to eat. They toyed with their targets before killing them, like they actually enjoyed the suffering. Real demons in every sense of the word. Roland noticed the hunter had been keeping his head down the entire time and asked Carter why. Carter explained that the man was Ironax from the Sand People, exiled from the Mojin clan. Roland told him to raise his head and said plainly that it didn't matter where he came from. As long as he lived in the border city, he was Roland's people. After getting everything he needed from all three men, Roland thanked each of them, praised what they had contributed, and announced they would each receive 10 silver coins as a reward. Afterward, Roland had Carter take him out to the border where the signal fires were lit at the start of every demonic season. He studied the terrain carefully, traced the path the men ran when they fled, and noted the distance from the signal point straight down the mountain to the river. Approximately 600 meters, Carter confirmed. Then Carter, choosing his words very carefully so as not to overstep, asked whether Roland was actually planning to remain in the city when the beasts came. Roland confirmed it without hesitation, and watched Carter go pale. The city only had a handful of guards. The castle had no capacity to shelter 2,000 residents, and defending against a full horde of demonic beasts with those numbers was simply not possible by any conventional measure. Roland looked out at the land ahead and said steadily that he had no intention of dying there. And he had no intention of abandoning his people either. And then, with the quiet confidence of someone who had been reborn from a world built on modern engineering and had every intention of using that knowledge, he laid out the beginning of a plan. They were going to build the strongest, most unbreakable walls that city had ever seen, and they were going to wipe those beasts out once and for all. He wasn't going to spend every winter running to someone else's fortress and begging to be let back into his own city. That era was over.